Good afternoon. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So our subject is Bangladesh, Oie Dike, this side, that side. Now, this side, that side means if you're standing in India and trying to look that side, you see Bangladesh on your sort of east and south, and Myanmar. There are two borders there, but we have other neighbors on the north. But for Bangladesh, from their side, Oie Dike, it is only a very, very large 4,096 kilometers border with India and a shorter border with Myanmar. So, Oie Dike can mean different things for both our countries. Now, is our relationship really only about the border? I personally think not. And the border divides what? A large number of Bengali-speaking people. Bengalis, we have Sudeep here who's written a full book on the Bengalis. So for Bangladesh, because India is so dominant, from all sides, if you look at the map, for Bangladesh, India dominates their border. And if you look at from the perspective of the northeast of India, say for instance, take a state like Tripura. Tripura is actually, from all sides, it's bordered by Bangladesh. So it's a very interesting, the Oie Dike here is very interesting, this side, that side. So are we Bengalis? The Bengali culture is very dominant, Bengali language, Bengali literature, our music, and of course, when four Bengalis are on stage, food. So all of this together, I would like to first, kind of ask the panel here, what do they see as Oie Dike? And I must also remind, our audience here that today is 1st February. February is called the month of language, Bhasha Mash in Bangladesh, because on 21st February, the language movement started in 1952. And that's really the beginning of Bangladeshi language sort of nationalism. So it's very interesting that we're discussing this subject, Oie Dike, right now. So maybe I'll start with Pinak Da, sir. How do you see, what is Oie Dike?
Well, there is another phrase that is frequently used, the Epar Bangla and Opar Bangla. That is this Bengal and the other Bengal. Now, I think there is a connection with history because how many of you would know that there was a concept of United Bengal in the pre-partition era. And actually, there was a move by Sarat Bose and various other leaders to actually say that we don't want to be partitioned. We want to remain together as Bengalis, regardless of the religion. So that happened, but ultimately it did not go through. But it was discussed in the high levels, including Gandhiji and Nehruji and others. They discussed it, but the Congress committee said, no, we can't have a united Bengal unless it is a part of India. So that was the decision which finally led to the partition going through. Then, of course, there was the great Calcutta riots in the August of 1946. But that more or less sealed the fate of the partition. So Epar Bangla, Opar Bangla, as you know, the Rabindranath Tagore has written his two poems are national anthems of both countries. And then there is this Bengali cultural thing, music, dance, etc. So these are some of the uniting features. There are also dividing features between the two, partition being one of them. But there are other aspects of it which we can discuss later.
Sreeradha, what do you feel when you think of Oie Dike, Epar, Opar, Oie Dike, this side, that side?
I think the warmth is very palpable for both the sides. But again, as was made out, because of historical factors, because of different other factors that came into being post-71, that Oie Dike wants to make a differentiation between Oie Dike, which wasn't the case earlier. So now, while West Bengal Bengalis and Bengalis all across India have a very kind of a genial look about Bangladesh, on the other hand, Bangladeshis look at us through a little different lens. While also I would say, and this is true for every Bangladeshi, that they know so much more about not only the Bengalis in this side, Oie Dike, but also across India. I mean, the kind of details, facts, and documentations that they have about us surprises me at times, that I don't think our children this side know that much about Bangladesh. But again, right now, in fact, it's interesting we are speaking about Bangladesh at a very flux kind of a situation where the emotions are a little more heightened about Edik and Odik. But in the best of times, it's very difficult when you see us meeting our Bangladeshi friends, you won't be able to make out ke Edik and ke Odik. It's a, but right now I think the differentiation is very marked. And again, various factors have played that. And I really hope that we'll discuss this along the way as to how we'll take it forward.
Sure. Sudeep, Dike Oie Dike. And you just came from Oie Dike to Dike, I think, only in August after the...
well, I had to see Madam off and then I reached back to India. So, ladies and gentlemen, and I've warned the panel, my distinguished panel, that I'm the bad boy of the session. So let me get right to it. Let me just bring in a slightly tangential spin to this about the Edik, Odik and Bengaliness and the idea that we have of ourselves on either side of the fence. I think, of course, I've been visiting Bangladesh regularly since the early 90s, but I lived there for nearly 3 years from 2022 onwards, right up until the implosion or explosion, if you want to call it, from last July. I came away after that in August. But there's something I want to just put there, just as a thought, as an attitudinal thought, and I'm sure we'll be addressing all these issues. When I was researching my book on the Bengalis and getting to write it, I'll relate an incident from there. 2 incidents, both related. One is that I was struck by this grand novel by one of the Bengali greats, Sharatchandra Chattopadhyay, Shrikanta, where I was absolutely riveted by the novel. When I was a child, of course, I'd read it, but when I was grown up and I was revisiting the Bengalis for the book, The Bengalis, it revealed to me an entirely new aspect, which is this, right at the front of the book, in the beginning, there is this description, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'll first say it in Bangla and I'll quickly translate, like, Shondha hoy hoy, it's nearly dusk, it's getting to evening, football kheliteche, Bangali chelera ar Musolmanera. The Bengali boys are playing football and the Muslims, the Musulmans. So that sort of got to me very deeply later on when I was far more grown up. When I was, the book came out in 2017, so this incident is from about 2015. When I was making a final recce to Bangladesh, and I was in Kolkata, waiting for my flight to Dhaka, and I met a Bhadralok, as some of us like to call ourselves. That, of course, has a binary called Chotolok, but we won't go there now. So this Bhadralok person asked me, where am I going? I said, to Dhaka. He said, why are you going to Dhaka? I said, because I want to do a final run-through for my book on the Bengalis. So he said, but why would you go to Bangladesh for a book on the Bengalis? So I said, it's, 2/3 of the world's Bengalis live there. And by the way, the name is implicit in the name of the country, Bangladesh. You can't get more literal than that. So it was, again, it was as if Sharat Babu's story, written with the greatest of grace and with the best of intentions, but it was a communication of the time which sort of brought back to be more than 100 years later. And I'm saying, are we still living through this epar, opar, edik, odik? And these are attitudes that transcend borders. You don't need a border. Bangali chelera, Musulmanera, what the hell? Sorry. I'm getting worked up. I'm allowed to do that. I'm Bengali. So are we all, by the way. So,
Right. I think that's an interesting beginning. And what you said, Sudeep, this could take us through several hours of discussion. So we'll move on and come to more contemporary times. We all know what has happened on 5th August, and following which Bangladesh is seeing an intense amount of political turmoil, internal political turmoil. There are all sorts of issues going around about, when will elections be held, whether elections will be held first, reforms will be done first. There is an interim government headed by Professor Yunus, and, because of several internal issues that this government is not able to resolve, like price rise, basic issues which involve the citizens of a country, security. So there is little disillusionment now. The big political parties are putting a lot of pressure on elections. And we all know that, we've seen in the public space that the Jamaat-e-Islami is rising. In fact, some people say the Jamaat is behind this government. There is a lot of, just for context, during the last 15 years, Jamaat-e-Islami was not allowed to function at all. Though they were not banned, they were not allowed to perform as a party. They could not take part in elections. But the other Islamic groups were very much there, but they're now all trying to come together under one banner. So a lot is happening in Bangladesh, and I know that Sreeradha went to Dhaka in November. She went for a conference. She's actually met a lot of people. So I think I'll come to you, Sreeradha, for a little bit. Please let us know what is actually going on. And since the lady on the panel, we all know that women in Bangladesh have done very well for themselves. There's been women's empowerment. The entire garment industry runs on their strength. And, from everybody, from every profession, from artists to, sports persons, there are women everywhere. And we've seen some very disturbing news about women artists not being allowed to, open shops, and little girls were not allowed to play football. So where is it heading? So a little bit from you, Sreeradha.
So taking away from the point where you said about the students and their movement, that we saw the finale happening on 5th of August with the fleeing of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to India. We saw it was actually in the middle of July that the students gave a clarion call to the Bangladeshis that all of us need to get together, to put up and resist the kind of security torture that was being unleashed on them by the government. And we saw all kinds of civil society across the spectrum, including Jamaat elements, and the elements who were earlier banned, not visible, they came up there too. And again, not just the Jamaat, but the entire Islamist groups that are present all over the country. They're small maybe, they don't have a kind of a great following as the media tends to make it be. But the one aspect I'd like to bring in here today, anytime you open the newspaper in Bangladesh or we speak to anybody, it's a fact that we see a very prominent prominence of Islamist groups led by Jamaat. Now, Jamaat is the only political party which has organizational setup in every 64 district of Bangladesh, which is not true for any of the other political parties. While having said that, at the same time, I don't think ever in the history of Bangladesh have they received more than 12% popular vote. Now it is being said that there's a likely possibility, because they have also been, and I've been physically been there in Bangladesh when I've seen that even during a Durga Pujo, Mondope, when the festival is being going to be held in another 2 days' time, there was no access to fresh water. The Jamaat leader who was with me, he was then, of course, guillotined on the other criminal trial of on Razakor lines, but he actually called up people, the local administrator, and said hand pump. And their whole idea of Jamaat is that, and in fact I met the General Secretary this time too, and he said that we want votes, so why would we come and do these kind of vandalism and the kind of terror elements that you accuse us of. Of course in India we take all that with a bit of salt, a bucket of salt actually. But having said that, what we now see is I think there are certainly a moderate element here, and I think that moderate element is the woman factor. As Riva just mentioned, that over 80% of the workforce in the ready-made garment industry, which has contributed robustly to their GDP and the miracle story of Bangladesh, is the work of women. But at the same time, both, I think, NGOs and these Islamic parties have also been in the forefront of that. While they stop them from playing football because they shouldn't be wearing shorts, they also still ensure about, health factors, the fact that they go out to vote. So it's a kind of a complexity there, but again, I think the women in Bangladesh, irrespective of what they wear, how many times they pray, how many times they go to the mosque, they will do that on their own volition. What I understand about them is that once you tell them to do something, they will certainly not do that. And I think that is really the bulwark of moderation in Bangladesh that they represent. Right now, I think even the ready-made garment industry is going through a bit of a challenge because most of the owners have fled. given they were all Awami Leaguers, and that industry is now going through, the orders have also stopped coming in like they used to be robustly. So we will have to see how that gets played out. But again, when we are talking elections, they certainly will play a stronger role than we've ever seen them before.
So, Shrudeep, if I may turn to you, you've been teaching in Bangladesh. So, you came in contact with a lot of students, and you were there right in the, the process leading up to August 5. It's shocked a lot of Bangladeshis also that a lot of students have come out later and claimed to be, closet Shibir. Shibir is the students' wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami. And in fact, they said that we were pretending to be Awami, Leaguers, Jubo League, but we are actually Shibir candidates. So what has attracted the students so much to this? Because, till now they were being said that, students don't even know what politics is. This is Gen Z. They are on all the time. They live in a virtual world. They don't know the real world. So can you throw a little light on this from your own experience of having...
Thank you. And before that, as the garment industry of Bangladesh was mentioned more than once, and the women who contribute to the garment industry of Bangladesh, I just want to add to that first, respect that. My scarf, my jacket, my shirt, and my trousers and my shoes are made in Bangladesh. So here's to the women who work in the socks are Swedish, but Sweden contributes to Bangladeshi aid. Dil hai Hindustani, but that's another story. So it's a globalization song. As far as students are concerned, it's a bit of a Rashomon effect, if I may call it that. Because yes, what Ambassador Ganguly said is true to some extent. We saw that. As someone who's, I'll try and address this as briefly as I can and as pithily as I can. I've actually seen a growth of conservatism over the past 30 years in Bangladesh when I've gone back frequently. But so also I've seen, because I've worked and lived here in India, I've also seen a parallel growth of conservatism in India as well. So it doesn't come to me as much of a surprise. I think we've gone around the bush a few times to say that there is a general trend across the world that conservatism is growing. So I think we need to see it from that light in the beginning, and then come to judgments about whether we need to be paranoid about it from a social perspective, a political perspective, or a diplomatic or whatever perspective. Having said that, I think what I saw among the students, and I taught at a university which calls itself the University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh. It's sort of in it, and that was a safe haven for many, many students of Bangladesh, urban Bangladesh, or urbanizing Bangladesh, including LGBTQI students who felt safe on campus. So, and we're very proud of that. Equally, as anywhere else, there was a conservative streak as well. But I think what I saw in these past 3 years, and certainly leading up to, and certainly in the build-up to the previous elections, the last election that were held in Bangladesh earlier, the results of which came out in early 2024, was a great sense of outrage, saying that, look, you guys control Bangladesh. So here I want to make a distinction between the Jamaat trend and the political collapse, the political meltdown of Bangladesh, the administrative governance meltdown of Bangladesh, which I think incensed many students as it did their parents as well, where we saw, I met somebody and I said, did you go and vote? He said, "Ha, sir, খুব ভালোভাবে ভোট দিয়েছি." I said, he's voted very well. I said, what do you mean? He said, "Ha, আমি 7-8 বার ভোট দিয়েছি. I voted 7 or 8 times. I mean, he voted so well." So the feeling was that why would you even need to do this when you control the politics of an entire country of 170 million people, when there is no viable opposition and the Jamaat and the others are kept in the wilderness, the political wilderness. You contribute to this sense of rage. And of course, there has been human rights violations of a grand nature. I've seen my students being beaten up and paid hospital fees for a student who had a bit of a bullet in his lung. These are true stories. And these are not Jamaati students. These are just students who said, we don't want to put up with this anymore. Why the hell won't you have dialogue with us? Why won't you dialogue with us? Why do you need to beat us up? All we want is for you to talk to us. So I think it had come to a point in Bangladesh where the momentum had built up to, and I think the administration, Sheikh Hasina, large sections of the Awami League and other associates and ancillaries, including some of the businesses that you speak of. They were living in this bubble, this ivory tower, to quote a cliche, and they were not listening to the people. They were literally speaking from on high, to the extent that after several hundred people were killed, the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, actually went on network TV and announced live, saying, "My doors are open for you, come and talk, we want to talk." And they said, "Why didn't you say this a month earlier? Why did you have to kill?" So I think there was a sort of Bangladesh is deeply corrupt, as corrupt as India, perhaps more in some ways. So I think this movement exposed a lot of these fractures and these lines. And I, for one, look at the movement with all its faults as also a time of stock taking, as also a sort of a national audit on Bangladesh itself, the politics of Bangladesh, the business of Bangladesh, the banking sector of Bangladesh, the administration of Bangladesh. So I think it's absolutely chaotic in Dhaka and Bangladesh. We all know it well. But I see it as a sense of audit with all the pitfalls that we need to keep in mind about where this audit might lead to. So that's the way I look at it. And I don't think we can discount Jamaat. We absolutely must not. And let me throw in another name in the mix, which nobody takes, the sort of, I like to call it the bull in the China shop, and pun entirely intended, the Bangladeshi army. Nobody's talking about the Bangladeshi armed forces. So I've introduced a few provocative thoughts, I hope, over here, with the hope that we talk about these things, because we must also talk about where the future lies for Bangladesh, and therefore about this 4,096 kilometer long border that Ambassador Ganguly spoke so eloquently of.
Thank you, Sudeep. You did mention about, audit, stock taking, and, taking stock of politics in general. But we have seen, this cycle of retributive politics, of politics of, taking revenge. This goes on in endless cycles in Bangladesh. Whoever comes to power will take revenge on whoever was in power before that. There is large-scale capture of institutions and, unofficial capture of institutions, and to some extent, even with this interim government, capture of institutions has started. So I'll turn to you, Pinak Da, that do you really think that, this cycle of retributive politics will come to an end? And what is the path for democracy in Bangladesh?
Well, Riva, it's like this, that since the liberation war, as they call it, in 1971, we are probably now in the 7th phase of regime change in many ways. Some of it happened with dictators coming in, assassinations of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and then after that there was an agitation for democracy, and then the two main parties alternated in governments, basically. And then came another phase, which was called the army-backed caretaker administration, which stayed on for 2 years, which was, in case, it was also unconstitutional, because the constitution did not have provision for a caretaker government beyond 3 months. Similarly, this government is unconstitutional in many ways, because there is no concept of interim government in the constitution. Although they have managed to fudge it with some Supreme Court orders and things like that, because they have changed the Supreme Court overall. Everybody was kicked out, all the judges, new judges were brought in, etc. So the things are like that. I mean, so I believe that we should not overreact, because we have seen these phases before, and we've dealt with those people. I was myself in High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Within, I think, 7 days of my arrival, this army moved in and set up this new caretaker government, with which I had to deal, and which I did, and finally it led to the election of 2008, when Hasina came back to power. And with a huge majority, she came back to power. And then she stayed on for 15 years. So I think this is something that Bangladesh goes through, as you said, in a cyclic way. But where will it end? Will it end? I don't see this ending, because the political discourse in the landscape and the political landscape is very fractured there. I mean, it shows that democracy and its institutions are still very fragile, and they don't have very deep roots that, thinks that you conduct elections properly. Everybody wants to stuff the election commission with their own people, This is what is happening in Bangladesh for quite some time. I mean, I don't want to paint too negative a picture, because I want to then shift a little to the economic factor that we talked about, the garments. Of course, they got hit very badly. Over 100 factories have been closed. 1 million garment workers, all women mostly, are out of jobs. So anyway, that's the economic aspect. And coming from where Bangladesh had reached, I'm not giving credit only to Hasina, but others also there. Bangladesh had become the fastest growing economy in Asia. And this is recorded by ADB, by World Bank, and everybody. And Bangladesh, by the way, which was treated and pejoratively by Henry Kissinger in 1971 as an international basket case, has overtaken Pakistan in every parameter of economic growth. Pakistan is 270 million, Bangladesh is 170 million. And you take a look, there are maps, there are statistical, data available, which shows how Bangladesh has overtaken. In fact, in per capita income, Bangladesh overtook India in per capita income. So the success story on the economic side was quite impressive. But then on the political side, what happened was, as Sudeep was saying, that the political discourse became very, very difficult. And I think there is a lesson in here for everybody. When you stay too long in power sometimes, and then what happens is that you forget the ground reality.
Right, sir. So let's move on now to speak a little bit about India-Bangladesh relations, because I think in Edik Odik, Edik we have a different perspective and Odik has a different perspective on our relationship. There is no doubt that, Government of India has made a lot of investments in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the largest recipient of development assistance from us. $8 billion of concessional loans, several very large infrastructure projects. In fact, all the train lines that existed between India and Bangladesh before 1965, when the border became hard, are being redone, and three trains run. Of course, everything is closed right now. Trade is $18 billion, of which 14 is our own exports. Then connectivity, you look at any kind of connectivity, inland waterways from 72 onwards uninterrupted. The inland waterways are being used for trade between Assam and West Bengal, for instance, Tripura, West Bengal, rest of India. So it's a transit trade. There is now Tripura, which is really landlocked from Bangladesh, locked from every side, now has the access to Chittagong port, only about 100 kilometers. There is a bridge connecting it to a place called Ramgarh in Chittagong hill tracts. So on connectivity, we've done a lot of work together. But where is all this headed? Where is India-Bangladesh relations headed? And besides the actual, if you look at the 2-3 issues which we need to deal with, one is the water resources, Tista water, the border issue, and trade deficit, maybe we can call it. There are no real, the big issues have been resolved. Let's take a reality check. The land boundary agreement, a massive agreement by which the entire boundary has been demarcated. The maritime boundary, India, Bangladesh took us to court. We accepted the order which was given by the arbitration court, and we accepted a little less. We accepted a position which was not exactly our original position. So from all angles, if you see, it was a successful relationship, but there is deep lack of trust right now. And how do you see the relationship growing in future? If I can start with Sudeep, how do you see it, and what can we do?
Well, as I have two distinguished diplomats with us this evening, so here I am on my way to becoming persona non grata all over again, or PNG, as my fine diplomat colleagues over here say. I see it, can I just put a different spin to it, because I know Sreeradha will speak of it, Ambassador Chakravarti will speak of it as well. I just want to come at it from the point of view of optics, if I may introduce the aspect of optics. For instance, let me just bring it to you backwards, if I may. Why is India distrusted in Bangladesh. Let's forget about why India looks at Bangladesh with a jaundiced eye, and we've all heard accusations about how could they get rid of Hasina, a friend of India. We stood by Bangladesh in 1971. Bangladesh has moved on. It's been more than 50 years since 1971. I think India should too. It shouldn't be judging Bangladesh or seeing Bangladesh from the 1971 lens, because Bangladesh doesn't see itself from the 1971 lens any longer. The Awami League compelled it to look at it through the 1971 lens, and Bangladesh said, we've done enough of that, let's move on. Okay, having said that, let me just come at it from the optics point of view. But as Ambassador Ganguly said, India and Bangladesh has done wonderful things in the bilateral relation, absolutely wonderful things to be truly proud of in the South Asian construct and in the bilateral construct. And yet, this friend of 1971, India and Bangladesh, India to Bangladesh or India to East Pakistan, is today distrusted, while the enemy of Bangladesh, or to be Bangladesh, China, which actually stood against the idea of Bangladesh from its very construct, from the very first days, is today a great friend of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a signatory to the Belt and Road Initiative, and Ambassador Wen, who's still the ambassador of China, the last time I checked, to Bangladesh, has been smiling like a Cheshire cat these past 2 years, because what is clearly India's missteps in Bangladesh. I'll give you several examples. The water treaty that Ambassador Ganguly talked about, absolutely, we need to sort of get our water act together with the Tista Water Treaty, the Ganga Padma Water Treaty, and I guess in the future the Brahmaputra as well. The Tista, and that's why I brought up the China issue, India had offered Bangladesh as a sort of a palliative, a sort of a reconstructive process in the Tista River Basin in Bangladesh, where, because of water supply issues, there are crop productivity problems, productivity has dropped, water supply, water tables have dropped. In a country of largely poor, 170 million farmers, it's a huge deal. India wouldn't move ahead, but when the same very ambassador, when I just took the name off, in December 2023, in Dhaka, I was present at that meeting, offered, and soon after that, offered $1 billion of Chinese aid to reconstruct the Tista Basin. The Foreign Secretary of India flew down to Dhaka and made a counter-offer. And I was looking at people saying, why did it take you so long? And why do you have to see it through the China lens in order to look at Bangladesh in the lens that you must do? Same year, India sent 20 locomotives, diesel locomotives that India no longer needs, to Bangladesh as a gift to the people of Bangladesh. A terrific offer. When the locomotives arrived, the public spin, and ladies and gentlemen, the spin on both sides, edik odik, is so strong that I sometimes think that the axis of the earth will shift. But let me just put that straight. The spin in Bangladesh is that they call us, India calls itself our friends. Why couldn't they have sent new engines? It had come to that kind of petty repartee in the public space. And the infrastructure, which Ambassador Ganguly talked about, terrific process. And of course, India's done it through Bangladesh to protect its northeastern axis and its China as a China bulwark, all said and done, but we have strategies and outcomes. These very roads, these very railway tracks, these very dredged waterways, they may have been done with Indian money for India's greater interest, fine. But they're today Bangladesh's national assets. And because of this pettiness of optics and this lack of Indian outreach to mend the optics, you will often hear educated Bangladeshis, businessmen even, who should know better, say that, India's taking us for a ride. And now which businessman would voluntarily take a loss for bilateral relations? Clearly that is not the story. But I think there is India's great lack in trying to communicate the India-Bangladesh story with productive spin, and not let China lead the dialogue and then come and say, Bangladesh Jamaat is taking over, China is making an ingress. Bloody hell, you let them walk in and take over that space of dialogue and optics. So how about pushing back a little bit? Sorry, I can get a bit excited with this, so but I'll stop. We can talk later.
Thanks.
Sorry, my apologies.
Sreeradha, what do you think? You think the optics, is it only optics, or is it deeper than that? Is it, a sort of very deep suspicion of India's intentions? Because, you build a road, you have a train connection, and the first thing the press will say is, oh, India is going to move its troops from one part of India to another through these train routes. I mean, absurd kind of allegations are made, even though the agreement clearly says that troops will not move. So, I mean, how much can you, what can you do about the optics?
There is a constituency who wants to play on that,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
also let's be a little honest about this. Right from 71 onwards, I think India's large presence has been there all over, including the Mujibur government, and we have Avinash sitting here who's written in details about that. But subsequently, also one particular aspect is the border killing, which is a regular problem of mafias on both sides. So we tend to kill both Bangladeshis as well as Indians. Indian media in the last 5 years, 10 years has hardly ever mentioned. Bangladeshi media on a regular basis will give you details about that and continues to be a problem. We've got the border teams meeting constantly, periodically, but we are not able to resolve this. So there is, but at the same time, I'd like to add here that despite the issues and the fact that India used to issue the largest visas all over the world for Bangladeshis coming to India on medical tourism and every other things that they would do in our country, including shopping and other, recreational activities. But I think Bangladesh understands, and I think while they're now playing up the Pakistan optics a lot more than the China optics, it's very, sound messaging to India. That, see, this is what our friends, you didn't let us kind of come closer. At this point of time, India is more hated because of its proximity to the Awami League. Let's not forget that. We can't run that down at all. That's going to live with us for some time because for, several years we've seen Awami League do pretty much large non-constitutional activities, human rights violations, and India completely overlooked it because this government worked for us and our security concerns. So that's something that works well. But my overall sense is to ask, to reply to you is that India and Bangladesh will have to work together. It's not going to be the same story as India and Pakistan. We can ignore Pakistan, we can live happily ever after without them, but Bangladesh and India are destined to work together. So the quicker we get on with the act, the better for all of us.
Thank you. Pinakda, I'm going to take the liberty of quoting from your book. This is Pinakda's book, I think available in Crosswords. So you have written in page 218 that for India, Bangladesh will remain a crucial partner with bilateral ties on a solid foundation. India's reliance on the Awami League and Hasina for maintaining robust ties has its risks. Then you go on to say later that the question often crops up about India's excessive reliance on Hasina for maintaining the upward trajectory in bilateral ties. The counter question also arises about India's options if Hasina loses elections. In the long term, India's strategy should be to develop ties with parties across the political spectrum. So what further would you lack? I mean, you've said some of the final words there.
Well, we did work with the Hasina government because with whom should we work? I mean, after all, there is a government in Bangladesh. We have to work with the government. We have worked with Bangladeshi dictators also and the caretaker administration also. I was there when the caretaker administration backed by the army and they were doing all kinds of political things like get rid of these two warring begums, Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia. In fact, I went and asked Professor Yunus, the Nobel laureate who is today heading the government, because he floated a party and wanted to become, acquire a political role. He was not a professional politician. So I asked him, why are you doing all this? So he said, no, the country needs me, people want me. I don't know, he somehow felt that he must come into politics, which finally he has again, and because he's heading the government. Anyway, that's a long story of why he's there, who backed him, etc. And foreign hands are, the allegations of all that is there. But where do we go from here? I think India has generally done the right thing by not overreacting. In the sense, because we have seen this before, so we are not overreacting. We are, the only pinch that they are feeling now is on the visas, because their people attacked the visa centers and we had to close them down. So, and now we are slowly reopening them, trying to get back to business. Trade, we are providing all the essential things. In the last figures that I have noted is that the monthly trade, which used to be around almost $1 billion US dollars, is down to about 600, which means there's a big gap developed. And the other thing I want to make about China, whenever I used to ask them, look, you have a huge trade deficit with China, but you never complain. But you have a trade deficit with India and every day you are complaining. So why is it that, and China even opposed your creation, whereas we helped you become, okay, they don't want to, you see, gratitude has a very short self-life in international politics, and we know that very well. But what I have always said, that look, we have to work together. Look at the geography, and how we are, joined at the hip, sometimes I used to say, and then we have no option but to work together. And they also need us, we also need them. It's a bilateral, mutually helpful attitude that we have taken. But I think this period will also get sorted out. I'm quite confident that they will have their elections. Maybe a new discourse will arrive, new parties will emerge, etc. But I'm afraid they have not settled down to a stable political system, in the sense, in democracy, I mean. Have 3-4 major parties who compete, etc. And Islamization, I must say, although it should not worry us so much if somebody wears the hijab or the burqa, but the problem is the link between that, the radicalism, and the security situation, which we have seen before, experienced before, and we don't want that to recur. And I think that is where we must put our eye on. But otherwise, normal trade, normal business, we have allowed to carry on. Nothing has stopped. And so I think that is one way of sending a message that, look, I don't want the people of Bangladesh, who we regard as friends, to suffer because there is no food, for example. I mean, we have sent huge consignments of rice to them recently, wheat, and all kinds of things. So I think that is the right way to go, because they have to sort out their own politics themselves. We can't say, do this, do that. That's not done in today's world. And I think we have to leave them. Now, one last word on attitude and mindset, if you mind. The mindset, of course, goes back to the 1947 partition and then 1971. Secession, you can call it, or liberation, they call it. Why do they call it liberation war? Because they say we were oppressed by the West Pakistanis, so we liberated ourselves from them. So they call it the war of liberation. And we, of course, say India-Pakistan war or whatever we want to say. The mindsets emerge from those things. And finally, the dominance of India is basically because of the asymmetry. Look at them. Our size, their size, our area, their area, our GDP. So they look at us with, sometimes with awe and sometimes with fear. And the asymmetry is a very, very important aspect, not just with Bangladesh, with all the smaller neighbors. So this is something we have to deal with in our bilateral relations with them. And it has to be nuanced in the sense that we use both hard and soft diplomacy, as we say. And so I think with the road ahead, I'm quite positive about it.
Yeah. Can we take one question at least? Maybe we'll take one question, if you permit. One, there's a gentleman there. I'm sure there must be other questions, but we've run out of time completely.
So I'm a Bengali. So this question on Dike Oie Dike. Why is it that since in 1970, both sides, the Paschim Bongo and Purba Bongo, we have singularly managed to have bad governance politically on both sides, whether they are Begums, Didis or otherwise? What is there in the Bengali character that we cannot govern ourselves properly?
Sudeep, you have exactly 30 seconds to...
Well, there's a word that I use in my book, which is borrowed from an academic, and the word is mastanocracy. So I think it is a mastanocracy. So I think from the late 60s onwards, where West Bengal adopted mastanocracy as a doctrine, and we refined it to high art, which is basically dokhol kara, to grab one political base by another, by another, by another. And I think Bangladesh is, being Bengalis, as I was saying earlier, Bangladeshi, but Bengalis too. I think they've just followed hook, line, and sinker on this sort of path to mastanocracy. So I actually find, dare I say it, similar DNA.
I'll just one last to attach to that is that when you have one Bengali, you have one political party. When you have two Bengalis, you have two political parties. And when you have three, there will be three political parties.
At that hopeful and helpful note, we will end our session today. We've completely run out of time. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. And please thank our panel, which is, I hope you learned something and you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.